Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, September 16th, 2019. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, investigative journalist Ben Westhoff on Fentanyl, Inc., how rogue chemists are creating the deadliest wave of the opioid epidemic. Opioid epidemic. Also on the program today, U.S. claims Iran fired on a Saudi Arabian oil facility. John Bolton may get his war after all. New Brett Kavanaugh revelations spark calls for his impeachment. Benjamin Netanyahu vows to break a ton of UN resolutions and annex the West Bank in the lead up to his re-election. The biggest auto workers strike in over a decade hit GM, I think it was last night at midnight. Meanwhile, Chuck Schumer, remember him, and Nancy Pelosi woo Donald Trump on background checks. I'm sure it'll be fine. Campaign trail, Bernie Sanders introduces massive affordable housing plan. Elizabeth Warren, an anti-corruption plan. Joe Biden, corn pop.
Perfect encapsulation of the three candidates.
Trump welcoming Modi as Kashmir remains under siege. Suspect caught in the burning of a 120-year-old synagogue in Duluth, Minnesota. Meanwhile, in New Jersey, a man arrested with massive arms cache and Nazi propaganda. Making America great again. Lastly, Ed Snowden wants to return to the U.S. if he can get a fair trial. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. Look, folks, if I'm a little bit, my energy's a little bit down today, if I seem a little bit blue, it is because came in this morning and I felt like I hadn't had been in touch with someone who's been important in my life for quite some time. And I went to Twitter to make sure he was all right, and I found that Dave Rubin blocked me. We will, I don't want to start the show on this kind of note, so we will talk about it later in the program. But, yeah, it's a sad day. It really is sad, and I understand. Look, Dave has joined the Blaze TV. He's moved on to conservative world. He's come out in many ways and moved on with his life, and maybe I should move on with mine. But I'm not quite convinced I'm going to. We'll see. We'll talk about it later in the program. Because I don't want to get, we've got too many other things to get to before we do. Yeah. And, however, let's talk about this. At the time when Brett Kavanaugh was having these hearings, we all knew the FBI did not have the time that it needed to investigate the actual claims. During the course of the questioning of Brett Kavanaugh, and I should say his sort of like yelling every response as if the volume and the anger he projects and the indignation that he projects is actually a substitute for the truth. During those hearings, he was questioned not just about what happened with Dr. Blasey Ford, but there were questions as to what happened in Yale. A woman who was a student at the time, her name was Deborah Ramirez, claimed that at one point Brett Kavanaugh had basically thrust his penis into her face at a party. At the time, Kavanaugh said, "Oh, if that had happened, it would have been all over the Yale campus." Well, the New York Times, I don't have the exact quote right in front of me, but the New York Times started off this piece by saying that's what Brett Kavanaugh said. And we did some reporting and we found that, in fact, it was all over the Yale campus, that many people knew about it. This is something, obviously, the FBI could have found out with a little bit more time. that was part of the reason why you didn't give him more time. Then in this same piece, a book written by Robin Pogareben and Kate Kelly, two New York Times reporters, as far as I know. Citing two officials, reporters said that the former Yale classmate Max Stier told senators and the FBI about a different episode of alleged sexual misconduct, which also involved Brett Kavanaugh whipping out his penis and thrusting on another woman who was not interested. Now, those two, that second, or this new revelation, the supposed alleged victim and others refused to comment on it. But what is bizarre about this story is not that this came out. I mean, look, the idea that Deborah Ramirez or Blasey Ford would go and put themselves in harm's way for no reason at all to lie about these things. The idea that Max Stier, who went to the Senate, he went to the FBI and to the senators to give them the information that he had. And this is a guy who is a Stanford Law grad, a former Supreme Court clerk. He runs a bipartisan Center for Public Service. This is also not a guy who's like, you know what, I'm going to just take a leap on this and pretend like I saw him do this. I mean, it would have been a much different debate had Brett Kavanaugh come out and said, look, I did some horrible things when I was in college and I would drink too much. And I have reflected on this and I think it's going to make me a better judge because I realize how horrible those things were. But that's not the grounds that they want to fight this on. They want to fight this on the grounds that it is irresponsible to hold this man to account for what he did. It is just not the way things are. That if someone who's gone through this type of, has this kind of pedigree and received all the proper finishings on that pedigree, that he would have to deal with this. It just wasn't the deal. The deal was at the time, you get to do this shit and it doesn't hurt you. It may hurt the women, it may hurt the victims, whatever. That doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. They can recover, they'll bounce back. But the deal was, as far as he understood, and then he shows up here and it's like, wait, you're changing the deal on me. This is an outrage. And so we have now, I think, about a half a dozen presidential candidates are calling for Kavanaugh to be impeached. I mean, because he lied. He lied over and over during that hearing. We all knew it. I can't even remember what it was now. The thing that he wrote in the yearbook as if it was some type of homage.
Renata alumnus?
Yes. It was an homage. Homage to her. We didn't tell her about it at the time. We said it as something that we thought, was a way of saying, like, she's great. We love her. She's terrific. And then like, oh, yeah, we also hesitated to let her know that we had actually written that. Here's that moment.
Ask you about Renata Dolphin, who lives in Connecticut. She thought these yearbook statements were, quote, horrible, hurtful, and simply untrue, end quote, because Renata alumni clearly implied some boast of sexual conquest. And that's the reason that you apologized to her, correct?
That's false, speaking about the yearbook. And she said she and I never had any sexual interaction. So your question is false, and I've addressed that in the opening statement. And so your question is based on a false premise and really does great harm to her. I don't know why you're bringing this up, frankly. Doing great harm to her by even bringing her name up here is really unfortunate.
Well, calling someone an alumnus in that way,
well, implying what you're implying about
by a number of your football friends at the time as boasting of sexual conquest. That's the reason that I'm bringing it up. And
yeah, no, it's false. You're implying that. Look what you're bringing up right now about her. Look what you're doing.
Chairman, I ask that these interruptions not be subtracted from my time.
I mean, this indignation. Look, every single person in that room knew he was lying. His wife, his kids, every single person in that room knew he was lying, and it didn't make a difference. Guy's going to sit on the highest court in the land for the rest of his life, for the rest of some of our lives. And he was lying through his teeth. And if you don't think the ability to admit that you did something wrong when it was so blatantly obvious, if you don't think that having at least the decency to say, I am holding one of the most important positions in our society, and I am going to show that you need to acknowledge the truth and make an argument as to why you have in some way changed or understand it differently. I mean, this stuff is like stuff that you want your 27-year-old boy to be able to deal with. Never mind that they're going to sit on the court. Like, you want that, like, you need to be an adult enough to say, I messed up. I feel bad for it. This is what I've done to mitigate it. That's what you expect out of your children as a parent. The idea that that's not immediately satisfactory or immediately to be expected and required of a Supreme Court justice. And I'm not saying that you get that and then you get a pass to go on the court. I'm just saying that's like, you have that responsibility if you're in a position where you're speaking publicly in that context. That's your minimum. That's the minimum they should require of you to walk through the door of that court, of that Senate hearing. And then we have sort of like this ongoing participation in this farce, where the New York Times, in some way, I mean, they just don't know how to deal with this. It's an excerpt from a book that their own reporters wrote, so they put it in the op-ed section. Now, that's fine, but there's new revelations and new reporting in there, and there should have been a reported piece as well on the front page. And then when they put it out to promote it on Twitter, this is what they put. New York Times opinion: having a penis thrust in your face at a drunken dorm party may seem like harmless fun. But when Brett Kavanaugh did it to her, Deborah Ramirez says it confirmed that she didn't belong at Yale in the first place. Like, really? Really? Does it seem like harmless fun to like whom? Like honestly, having a penis thrust in your face at a drunken dorm party may seem like harmless fun. I would want to sort of like get a sense of like, from whose perspective is that? From maybe the drunken penis guy, it might seem like harmless fun, but I have a feeling that just about everybody on the other end of that drunken penis would not feel like it's harmless fun. And but that's what your expectation, be harmless fun. But something very specific about this woman that made her feel somehow like she didn't belong there. No, the way this should be constructed is when Brett Kavanaugh realized Deborah Ramirez might have a sense that she didn't belong at Yale, she became the perfect target for it to be fun for him when he's drunk to wave his penis in her face in front of his friends. We found the most vulnerable person in this general area, and then we just did to her what we could do. That's the way that this should be constructed. They had to take this tweet down because, of course. Meanwhile, some right winger, who is she now? Bethany Mandel?
Her and Seth Mandel, they're just right wingers. I'll get the outlet here.
Yeah, she wrote, I lived with guys, all guys, my senior year of college. So in other words, she chose to room with guys during her senior year in college. Perfectly valid choice. I went to a co-ed dorm school. Nice. I've opted in to live with guys. Invariably, we're going to be exposed to stuff. That's fine.
She's Ricochet Media, by the way.
And this happened to me literally every day. Now, I doubt it did in the same context, but she clearly felt comfortable in that area. Maybe the idea of consent is too hard for her. Go back, please. One of my roommates walked around naked every day. And then she puts in parens, not Avi Smolin. That's at Avi Smolin. But also, hi, remember this? Laughter, 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 laughter. And then Avi Smolin, I guess, didn't think it was so funny. He replied to her, if I recall correctly, our roommate walked around in his underwear, and I think you asked him to cover up.
And I think
if you asked him to cover up, he would have. If you did ask and he didn't, then I'm sorry I didn't act to help fix it then. I do believe Deborah Ramirez and Christine Blasey Ford, and that we should trust women when they come forward. In other words, Avi Smolin is saying, like, I didn't like you then. I don't like you now. I think there's a real difference between having friends that you agree to live with who walk around in their underwear than having some drunken guy slap his penis in your face at a party and laugh about it. She's obviously not capable of seeing that difference. And I would say good for her, or at least fortunate for her, that she's never been victimized in such a way. It's not a question of like, I'm so strong that I can handle being around guys who I'm friends with wearing underwear. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And we now have two guys who sit on the Supreme Court who have incredibly credible, like shockingly credible accounts of sexual harassment levied against them. It's pretty stunning. It's pretty stunning.
It is and it isn't.
Exactly. It's I guess a stunning reminder of what is in this country.
Yeah, the rules really haven't changed that much, actually.
It's I probably should have started with the Dave Rubin stuff.
Ask the moms.
Ask the moms. I think we should ask the moms. I think there should be. I would love to see a poll of moms. When you send your daughter to college, pro or against the idea of having some drunk guy slap a penis in her face?
Separate but related.
How funny would that be? For fun for some people.
Yeah, put it on the intake form, on the orientation form. I separate but related. I'd like to know about the gambling debts as well.
Yes,
but that's for another day.
Yeah. Right.
But hopefully someday.
Well, I'm sure.
I'd like to ask whoever
25
about
years,
that.
Somebody's
ask the Sackler family.
Ooh, want to go to another Nationals game?
Folks. Exactly. Did you know that human beings have been shaving for over 5,000 years? I did not know that. Nope. Ancient Greeks, they would just do it with a sharp knife. I mean, a sharp rock, I think. They didn't need any special bells and whistles. They just shaved. And that is why Harry's doesn't add any like gimmicky stuff to their razors. Actually, it really is. Their razors are very classic. They focus on the qualities that matter the most, which is a comfortable shave. They don't upcharge you to make your razor look like it's some type of thing that should be on, Rambo's utility belt or on Captain America's.
Does Rambo have a utility belt?
Well, if you saw the first Rambo, actually, he sort of loaded up and he did.
Okay. Yeah, no, I actually haven't seen it.
Harry's quality durable blades. They come at a fair price, just $2 per blade. They cut out the middleman, keep the prices low. They send it directly to you. These things are great as gifts. They're great for yourself. You can create a customized shaving kit with stuff that you like. The reoccurring deliveries, so you don't have to think about blades. One more thing you can put on auto. I'll tell you something. That is basically the way that I keep my head above water. I just try and put everything on auto. Get your blades coming. You don't have to think about it. I don't have to go shopping for this. I don't have to put it on my list. Smaller lists. And if you don't love your shave, they give you a full refund. I've talked about the different things I love about Harry's for years. Actually, shaved last night. The trimmer blade head, one of my favorite attributes of it, and just the handle itself. Substantial, but not ridiculous, classic. Put it up in your medicine cabinet. You're not embarrassed. Join the 10 million who have tried Harry's. Claim your special trial offer by going to harrys.com/majority report. You'll get a weighted ergonomic handle for a firm grip, 5-blade razor with a lubricating strip and trimmer blade, rich lathering shave gel with aloe to keep your skin hydrated, and a travel blade cover to keep your razor dry and easy on the go. Go to harrys.com/majority report. Start shaving better today. Folks, I hope that you are becoming increasingly aware that there are problems with internet security. And that your data is, OPSEC is the word of the day around here. Wait, is that right? Yeah, OPSEC. If you think that you're not being snooped on or that nobody cares about your online data, you are wrong. Hackers, governments, ad companies, ISPs, you need trusted software that's going to protect your online activity. ExpressVPN. Their apps use powerful encryption to secure your data. ExpressVPN runs in the background of your computer, your phone, and when you use the internet, just like you normally would, you're protected. Simply download the app, click to connect, voila, you're protected. ExpressVPN is the fastest VPN. It costs less than $7 a month. Comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. ExpressVPN uses new cutting-edge technology called Trusted Server to make sure there's no logs of what you do online. It's time to stop hackers, Big Brother, the internet companies from grabbing all your data. Take back your online privacy with ExpressVPN to protect your online activity today, and find out you can get 3 months free at expressvpn.com/majority. That's Express, EXPRESSVPN.com/majority for 3 months free with a 1-year package. Visit expressvpn.com/majority to learn more. Of course, we put links in our blog posts and on the website. Take a quick break. When we come back, Ben Westhoff, award-winning investigative journalist, author of Fentanyl, Inc. We'll be right back. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Ben Westhoff. He's an award-winning investigative journalist and author of Fentanyl, Inc., How Rogue Chemists Are Creating the Deadliest Wave of the Opioid Epidemic. Ben, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
Lot of news literally today and in the past couple of days about the legal cases against Purdue Pharma, against ones that we may see against the Sacklers. There is the New York State AG is looking into reports that Sacklers wired money out of different funds and whatnot, ostensibly to pay some of their fines or avoid some of their fines or who knows what. This is going to be ongoing, and you're writing about fentanyl, which is what you've called basically, and maybe not just you, I think the CDC, the third wave of the opioid epidemic. Walk us through those waves, and then we'll talk about sort of the history of fentanyl, because fentanyl is of a different ilk, I guess, of drugs, which is going to be really the problem of the future.
Yeah, the first wave of the opioid epidemic started in the 90s, and that was the prescription pills like OxyContin. And doctors began over-prescribing these pills. And then when patients, their prescriptions ran out, a lot of them started turning to street heroin. These were, law-abiding citizens, but heroin had met the same kind of craving. And so that was the second wave of the opioid epidemic. Now it's almost impossible to find pure heroin anywhere, most parts of the United States. It's all being cut with fentanyl. And fentanyl represents the third wave of the opioid epidemic. It's much more powerful than heroin, about 100 times stronger. And so when it's cut into fentanyl, people don't even know it's there, and a lot of people die immediately.
And we should say that the overprescription of the opioids was, there was a bunch of different choke points where sort of things, I want to say, faltered, but it really was, in many instances, malfeasance. I mean, arguably the doctors, were the least malfeasant. Maybe they were most misfeasant, but they were basically sold on this idea that this class of opioids was non-addictive because of the way that it had been constructed, I guess, which, like you imply, didn't turn out that way. And they probably should have been aware of it when they were selling millions of pills into, to counties with significantly less people.
Yeah.
So give us this history of fentanyl, and it is part of a class of drugs that is called, got it right here, the novel psychoactive substances. First, just give us the history of how fentanyl got introduced into the country, and then let's talk about the implications of novel psychoactive substances.
Fentanyl was created in the late 1950s as a totally legitimate medical drug. It was made by a Belgian chemist, and it was used in things like open heart surgery, and it's still a very important, widely used hospital drug for things like epidurals in childbirth and colonoscopies. But the fentanyl that we're hearing about mostly is not this fentanyl. The fentanyl that's killing people is made illicitly, almost all of it in China. And it's made in labs there. And often it's sent directly through the mail to U.S. consumers. People can just order it off the internet. People, drug users, drug dealers. And it's also channeled through the Mexican cartels. And they buy it from China, package it up, and then send it north into the U.S. across the border.
So how is this? I mean, when you describe this dynamic, how is it related to it seems like it's running in parallel to the opioid crisis, and it seems also that it's in another respect, it is an extension of the opioid crisis.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It is, basically the same chemical structure, the similar chemical structure, similar effects to morphine, heroin, OxyContin, all of these opioids and opiates we keep hearing about. So it's piggybacking on the opioid crisis. But the problem is it's making things much worse. So whereas deaths from prescription pills and deaths from heroin are falling in recent years, deaths from fentanyl are actually increasing every year. So it's a really bad situation.
And we're talking about tens of thousands of deaths, right?
Yeah, there's more than 30,000 deaths from fentanyl alone in 2018.
And so what percentage of those, I just want to clearly delineate these two sort of like categories of problems that we're dealing with. One is that we have people who became addicted to opioid pain medication. They move to street heroin, and then I guess part of the problem at that instance is a lot of that street heroin is now laced with fentanyl, and it ends up killing people. It seems the other, and maybe there's like three different versions, because that's sort of the hybrid. Then there seems to be one that is exclusively a function of like people just taking other drugs and getting fentanyl and not being aware of it. And then there's also, I would imagine, still on some level, and maybe this is ended because of greater awareness, an overprescription of fentanyl. I, know people who were prescribed fentanyl as a, sort of like a chronic pain, solution.
Yeah.
And, I have someone I know fairly well who ended up having to go to a clinic as an inpatient. And, when people around there saw him and the amount of fentanyl he was taking, they're like, we don't meet many people like you who are alive anymore.
I believe it. Yeah. Someone's tolerance can go up high. In fact, a common thing has been for people to buy the fentanyl patches off the black market. And the patches are for people with cancer or other types of chronic pain. And, you're supposed to use one, but sometimes addicted users will put on 2, 3 or more on their body. And there's often hospital fentanyl that is misappropriated, stolen by anesthesiologists and other people working in hospitals. But the biggest problem, the biggest way that fentanyl is abused is on the streets. And the problem is that most people really don't want it. Like you said, they want other drugs that fentanyl is cut into. So it's cut into not just heroin, but cocaine and meth and prescription pills. And so it's a way for drug dealers to save money. And that's how people like Prince died. Prince thought he was taking a legitimate pharmaceutical pill, a narcotic, but it was actually a fake pill that had fentanyl in it.
Now, how does Prince get a fake pill? Isn't he going, is this not a non-prescription situation? Was he buying it like somebody was supplying him with stuff that they got a bad shipment or something?
Yeah, the guy who got him the pills was not a doctor. He was procuring it on a black market of some sort, but that guy's not really talking exactly where he got it from. But it happens all the time, because what people do is they buy pill presses, these industrial drug dealers and manufacturers. They buy pill presses and stamp pills to look exactly like the real thing. So there was another big musician, Mac Miller, a rapper, who thought he was taking an OxyContin pill, and it looked exactly like one, but it was made on one of these pill presses, and it had fentanyl, and he died right away.
So the person who's selling this, they're thinking like, okay, fentanyl is cheaper. I'm going to make it look like it's an OxyContin pill. the user's not going to get really a sense of that it's different, and I'm going to be able to sell a ton of these. They just don't realize, they just don't know how to do the proper dosage, or is it just that
that's exactly right. Yeah, and it's almost impossible to properly dose it unless you're a trained chemist, pharmaceutical engineer in a lab, because it's such a tiny dose of fentanyl to make someone overdose. It's less than 2 grains of rice. And so trying to mix that up into a solution of something else, mix it with other drugs, is pretty much impossible for someone without training.
Okay, so we've moved into this sort of like a second or third sort of like track here of what is problematic, and this is the one that you pursued, that we have. This is not as tied into the idea of drug companies. It may have been sparked in some respect by the demand that this opioid crisis developed, but it's not. It's no longer. It's sort of like the solution set for this is a very, very different one. It seems to me, because the problem is relatively like. The problem, it seems to me, and then when I talk about what you discovered when you went to China, is that not only is this a classic case of sort of outside importation of illicit drugs, but the nature of manufacturing of these drugs creates a whole different set of problems.
Yeah, that's correct. When you think about opiates, traditional drugs like heroin, which comes from the opium poppy, and that has to be grown in a field, and that takes a long time. It's susceptible to law enforcement discovering these fields. But these new drugs like fentanyl are all made in a lab. And so it's much cheaper, it's much quicker, and as I said, it's much more powerful. And so China as a epicenter for drugs is a pretty new phenomenon. You know, traditionally Americans have gotten their drugs from places like Mexico or Colombia or Afghanistan, but China has a particularly, it's a new problem because the people making these drugs in China are not cartel members. They're not big criminal masterminds. For the most part, they're just regular chemists. They're drug chemists, they're businessmen, businesswomen, and they're just trying to make money. A lot of them actually operate within Chinese law. They make stuff that's legal in China, but it's illegal in the US, and they smuggle it over. And so that's what I went to China to investigate.
I mean, walk us through, let's talk about your investigation in China, but will you just also explain the dynamic, and I guess I was aware of this as a college student when MDMA first came on the scene. I think probably the first time that I was exposed to it, I think it was legal or very, or nearly legal in the sense that the way that we outlaw contraband, or put on the contraband list, when we talk about lab-created drugs, is basically the chemical structure, but you can change one small connection between the carbon atom and the oxygen atom. I don't know what I'm talking about, but something to that effect, and it suddenly becomes legal again without a tremendous change in the impact of the drug. Is that right?
Yeah, that is right. In the U.S., for the most part, we've kind of got a blanket ban for these type of manipulations you're talking about. So it doesn't apply in the US much anymore. But in China, they have to ban each new drug individually. And so you take something like fentanyl and you switch the chemical formula just a tiny bit, and you've got something now that still has the more or less the same effects as fentanyl, but now it's legal. And China has tamped down on that a lot, but other drugs too, like you said, with ecstasy, with synthetic marijuana, like fake marijuana, like K2 and spice, it's sometimes called. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of new variations of these drugs that can be made in these Chinese laboratories, and then poof, all of a sudden they're legal.
And I imagine too that there's nobody there going like, oh, we changed this structure a little bit. I'm going to take it, and I can tell you, you really only should take 3/4 of this pill as opposed to a full a full pill that we used to take, right? I mean, there's nobody out there. There's no regulation even on the China side about like what constitutes the dosage for this stuff.
No, there's no human testing at all. So that means that the people taking these drugs are basically human guinea pigs.
So, all right, tell us what you found in China, because we're basically just talking about small businesses that have an import-export business. They produce this stuff, and they probably have a third party that does the smuggling, right? So they just supply it to somebody in, I don't know, in Switzerland, and then that person ends up doing. I mean, how does it work? And what are the different ways that this fentanyl, which is basically it's poison, right? I mean, it's basically some type of filler. In this context, it's just poison filler that is used either as, people want to buy fentanyl, but more likely used as like some type of, it sounds like I don't know, like the way the corn is in all our food. They just want to put it in all the drugs because it's cheaper.
Yeah, that's right. Some people do want fentanyl. Most people don't, but I kept hearing that all these drugs like fentanyl were made in China, but no reporter had ever been in one of these labs. And so I wanted to do that. I wanted to go. And so I just started emailing these different companies and labs. And I pretended to be a drug dealer. I asked if I could come visit the lab if I came to China, and they said, sure.
How do you pretend to be a drug dealer? Do you just say
I just said I was one, I used a fake email address. There wasn't really much vetting, that's for sure.
Okay. What was the email address? Was it something like
I sell you
drugs at gmail.com or something like that? Or
no, these were just totally, if you looked at the websites for these companies, you would think they were legitimate Chinese chemical companies. Right. And they didn't just have drugs, they had thousands of chemicals on their websites, and they said they would custom make any chemical you want. So that's one sign that they're up to no good. But they said I could visit, and so I did. I went to China last year, and I met up with one chemist in Shanghai. He drove me. He had this kind of beefy driver, this kind of muscled guy who I was worried was the muscle of the operation. I was a little nervous, but when I got to the lab, I was expecting a sort of underground, seedy den of iniquity with guys and guns, guarding the door or something. But it wasn't like that at all. It was basically a suburban office park with a fountain, in the middle of it. And we parked and went up the elevator, and the lab was, it looked just kind of like a high school or a college lab. It was bigger. They were making huge amounts of these different types of fentanyl and other drugs, but it to me just was not at all what I was expecting. And I didn't buy anything. I didn't give them any money, but I did get a chance to see what these places were really like.
So, and were they basically, did they give you a tour of their products and basically say like, this is how we do it? And this is, are they selling you on the quality control? I mean, like when they're taking you around, they think you're a buyer. What do they think that you want to hear?
Yeah, they just wanted to, I told them I needed to see that the quality of the lab was up to my standards. And so they were trying to impress me with their lab and yeah, the quality. They print out sheets when they send these drugs through the mail, and it says 95% purity, whatnot. And there's also kind of advanced smuggling that often goes on too. And so they send these drugs in packages with that are meant to look like dog food was one I saw. Another one was meant to look like dried banana snacks. And these are to help get around U.S. Customs. And they're very effective at, sending these drugs through the mail that way.
And so, were you afraid of the Chinese government at all when you were over there?
Yeah, I was almost more worried of the government than I was about the drug dealers because I could have been put in jail for something like doing this investigation, and there wouldn't have been due process or anything like that.
And how many other places did you see on your trip? Did you go? Was it just one facility, or were there others?
I also went to a place in a city called Wuhan, which is a big chemical and industrial epicenter in the middle of the country. And there I went to a sales floor where they were selling fentanyl precursors. So these are the most important ingredients to make fentanyl. And so beforehand, I chatted with a bunch of the salespeople on Skype, and they told me that they were sending huge quantities of these fentanyl precursors to the Mexican cartels. They didn't say the cartels, but they said all their sales were going to Mexico, so it's not very difficult to put that together. But again, I was shocked when I got to this company because there were hundreds and hundreds of these salespeople in cubicles behind computers. Almost all of them were like mid-20s. They were college graduates. This was a sales job for them, and they got good benefits, free cell phones, and there they all were, just selling these fentanyl ingredients like it was a legitimate chemical.
Wow. So they're basically just taking orders constantly from cartels creating fentanyl.
Yep, exactly. And from my reporting for my book, I concluded that this company was selling more of these fentanyl ingredients than any other company in the world. And it turns out they have 700 employees and branches all over China.
And so this stuff is then going to Mexico and presumably in some labs in Mexico?
Yeah, it's a lot less sophisticated. Mexico doesn't have the chemical industry. They train chemists to make fentanyl from scratch. But when they get these ingredients, it's already like 90% of the way there. And so the cartels just finish it, package it up, and they send it across the border into the U.S.
So this is, it is a particularly unique problem, it feels like, in terms of, that we've faced in terms of drugs, because it's not just a question of people ODing on stuff that they're aware they're taking. It's that there are different sort of seems like classes that are problematic with this, is that people are taking stuff that they don't realize the fentanyl's in. Plus they are taking a substance that, I guess to a certain extent you could say this about LSD, which is created in meth to a certain extent. But this is one which, because of the way that it's created, is very difficult to get a sense of how to, to self-diagnose what your dosage should be. It seems like there's a whole host of problems around this that there's really no mechanism in which to deal with in our law enforcement structure.
That's exactly right. And the way I put it in the book is that the Pablo Escobars of today are operating in China without any fear that their government is going to put them in jail. And so that's really the problem, is that the laws in China are such that a lot of these people are operating totally legally. And that's what I witnessed when I was there.
Do you think that if the Chinese government was to say, all right, look, you cannot sell, you cannot manufacture, you cannot sell the components to manufacture, that would take care of the problem?
I don't think it would take care of the problem, but it would help a lot. And China has already banned these fentanyl analogs. And I think if they banned the fentanyl precursors, that would do a lot because, like I said, these are just businessmen. They want to operate within the law because it's too expensive to, risk getting caught and things like that. And so that is definitely the first step is changing these laws.
What would be the second step? I mean, it seems like on the, we can do something on the supply end. It seems relatively easy at this point in China. Not we, I guess maybe that would be a point of negotiation with the Chinese in terms of the supply, because it's just, you got to go back to just knocking off legal drugs or drugs that don't have the ability to kill people on some level. But what do we do on the demand side?
Well, that's a really good question. And one thing I really advocate for is something called fentanyl testing strips. And so, like I said, most people don't want fentanyl and don't even know it's in their drugs. But these strips, they're very cheap. And what they can do is they can test to see if fentanyl is in your drugs. They're kind of like a pregnancy test. You dip it in a solution of your drugs. And if there's one line on the strip, it means there is fentanyl. If there's two lines, it means no fentanyl. And so studies have already shown that people who use these and find fentanyl are less likely to use and to overdose. So that's one thing I advocate for.
What are the different programs that we could institute that would deal with it? I mean, obviously, like at this point, right, you're losing 30,000 people a year to this drug. The idea of decriminalizing it at the very least, so that you can sort of institutionalize and provide support for that type of simple test seems completely obvious, because it's a drug that people don't even want. So the idea of decriminalizing it, it's not like more people are going to go out like, I'm going to try fentanyl now. Like, is there anybody in the country who's going like, I would try fentanyl, but it's illegal, so I'm not going to?
That's a good point. Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely. You look at countries like Portugal and Spain, and they've decriminalized drugs, and even the strong drugs, even the hard drugs. And when it comes to users in the U.S., a lot of people want to distinguish between users and dealers, for example. So we should give care and treatment to the users, but we should lock up the dealers. But in the case of the small dealers, these are often just people who are addicted users themselves, and they only started selling to support their own habit. And so I think if you decriminalize, you take away this market for all these drug dealers to make all this money, and you bring people out of the shadows. You help them get the treatment they need instead of putting them in jail, where when they get out, they're most likely to go back on again.
Is there anywhere, I mean, is based upon our what you see across the country, is there any areas that you're seeing specifically, like pilot programs that are working best with this, or?
Yeah, actually in New England is where the fentanyl problem started, and that's where it really hit the hardest. Now it's kind of moving west across the country and is really bad in the Midwest, where I'm located. But in New England now, they're actually seeing death rates drop from these drugs. And that has a lot to do with these programs. Are called medication-assisted treatment. They're using low-level opioids like methadone and Suboxone to help people taper off. Things like the Medicaid funding has gone to help lots and lots of people who need this. So only a tiny fraction of addicted users are able to get the treatment, to get any treatment at all. And there's also even more radical solutions available that are illegal in the U.S., but they use them in places like Canada and Europe. And the one I'm thinking of is called supervised injection facilities. And that's where you legally allow someone to shoot up heroin, fentanyl, or really to use any drug, but they get clean needles. They're overseen by professionals, doctors and nurses, and they get the support they need. And no one has ever died in one of these facilities. But like I said, they're illegal in the U.S.
Of course. Why wouldn't they be? Unbelievable. Well, it's a fascinating story, and I have a feeling it's going to be one that is going to dominate the headlines for years to come, not unlike what we saw with opioids in the past couple of years. Ben Westhoff, Fentanyl, Inc., how rogue chemists are creating the deadliest wave of the opioid epidemic. We'll put a link at majority.fm and within the podcast description. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me on, Sam.
All right, folks. We're going to... Maybe we should just do this part for the freebies. The Dave Rubin. Ladies and gentlemen, for past couple of years, one of the things that I spent my time on, I sat down with Team Seder. We do this every 6 to 10 weeks. We do a evaluation of what I should be doing with my time, what projects would be the best use of both my time, my skill set, and best for society. And sometime in, I think it was late 2015, maybe early 2016, team gathered round. There was a couple of folks on the team who presented a PowerPoint presentation suggesting that one of the things I should be focusing on is Dave Rubin pretending to be of the left, to pretend, branding himself as the last liberal, and therefore was in a perfect position to critique the left because as a liberal, the party had left him. The ideology had left him, and his bona fides at that time were impeccable. He was someone who was against identity politics, but also made it very clear that he was gay and married. He was against the death penalty. At the time, he was for single-payer health care, though it subsequently became clear that he didn't know what that meant, and was also for limited government, which, if you know anything about single-payer health care, you know is probably the greatest expansion of government that we could have. What else was he for? He was for marriage equality and probably one or two other things. Oh,
did you say gun control?
Some gun control. Sort of vague.
Recently, he's saying, "What's the point?"
Right, exactly. He's made some transitions. He was pro-choice. Now he's very reluctantly pro-choice. In fact, now that he's blocked me, I can't tell when he's going to actually make this pivot. Recently, he signed on with the Blaze. This is after signing on with Turning Points USA last year for funding and the libertarian funding that he got. The
Ayn Rand Institute?
Ayn Rand Institute, which, of course, is funded by the Koch brothers, by, maybe one or two contributions downstream or upstream, I should say. So, and all this time, I asked Dave to come on the show, or I would go on his show, or we could meet somewhere and have a conversation. Now, we're going to go back and sort of, I don't know, maybe play a little bit of a slideshow. As you can see, Dave Rubin has blocked me. And I'm going to go through this slideshow, some of the tweets. Just bring some people's, "Hey, Rubin report, sincere question. Have you or your show ever received funding directly from the Mercers or from a Mercer-funded entity?" He never responded. I asked Dave back in October of 2017, how do you square your desire for limited government with your support of single-payer healthcare? Seems to be at odds. Elaborate? And never heard about this. Now, his book at that time was in the works, and it sounded like he was teeing up his book tour. And I really wanted to make sure that if anybody ever wrote about his book, they'd have to search and see the tweets that we had in between each other. People can use this one. Go ahead. At one point, he did... this, of course, was when someone pranked Dave, and I thought that was really wrong. With a $100 super chat question asking him to debate me, and he jumbled, he wouldn't do it. And then I asked him, I understood why he didn't want to mention my name, but please give him back his money.
And YouTube did.
Yeah, YouTube did. That all worked out. And then Dave asked me at one point, Dave claims that
So Josh Harkinson said, "Why won't you debate me or Sam Seder?" And so he replied to Harkinson, and
now,
then you got
just
it
to be
on it.
clear, he said that Harkinson called him some bad things, like alt-right or whatnot, and defamed him, I think, at one point. And then he invited him on, and then apparently Harkinson said no. As he wrote, "I invited you, declined. You're embarrassing yourself. Supporting the free speech has nothing to do with which guests I choose." And then I wrote, "The question seems to be, why won't you invite me?" And Dave responded to me back then. This was June of 2017. "Got your email request for an interview. You just posted a video titled Dave Rubin Professionally Stupid. I'll pass and not interacting further." Now, I want to make it clear, it's not a video. He said you posted a video because the video was posted. It was Michael being rude, and someone
May I
else
just say,
titled,
Yes, I just wanted to be clear. We were rude in the video, and, the great Kelly was rude in the title.
Right, okay. So there was a lot of rude people around here.
And I just got to be fair, I suggested that title to Kelly.
Matt,
so
there was a pipeline from the content I said to Matt's suggestion to Kelly's execution. So there was a lot of people questioning Dave's intelligence.
And then I wrote, "I admit to not viewing the video, but the title was rude. I think because I was responsive, Rubin Report will accept my apology and have me on," because I apologized.
Not only, whoa.
Publicly.
Not only did you apologize, you literally
censored
silenced and violated my free speech.
I pulled down the video.
You assaulted the marketplace of ideas on behalf of Dave Rubin,
And-
which surprised me. I thought he'd immediately demand it be put back up.
And I asked him, I think this was earlier, "Why won't you have me on in the spirit of genuine exchange of ideas?" And he goes, "All I really know about you is from the dickish tweets you've been sending me." Maybe you should have tried email. And that's, I guess, when I did try.
Why did he go ad hominem?
And then I went down and I said, "I think most have been quite polite. You made a Twitter request for suggestions from the left. I responded, happy to email though." And I did email, and then he found that video that Michael did. And even though I took that down and publicly apologized for the rudeness displayed by my rude people here. And believe me, I docked everybody here. A lot of people didn't get dessert that day at the commissary. Yep. Then coming up this year, "Hey Rubin Report, condolences. It seems the IDW is culling the herd." This is, of course, from a Quillette piece. "Hang in there, brother. Seems like nobody on the right's open to ideas. Want to come on the show to discuss solidarity?" I tried to reach out to Dave. Wait, go backwards, right? Where's that retraction? Retraction. Yeah, this is when Dave, I asked him to, refund the money, and I go, and I said, "Congratulations, if true, that you've refunded the money." And then I retracted it because I was informed that Dave did not refund the payment for the super chat he censored. YouTube refunded. So I wanted to retract my claim that Rubin Report had some integrity in doing so. No excuses. This is on me. My apologies. I will double my efforts to do better. I wanted to just straight shooter, folks. Straight shooter. That's what I've been trying to do. And, that's our little walk down memory lane. We're back stuck here with Rubin Report.
We also have the first time you ever mentioned Rubin Report on Twitter, if you want to go through
this is the first time. Okay, so I was responding to a PBS NewsHour is attempting, had a tweet that said, "No labels is attempting to bridge the divide between left and right, John Huntsman and Joe Lieberman on NewsHour." And then I put LOL, which was a thing that the kids used at that time, meaning laugh out loud. And then someone called me regressive.
Yeah, Persian atheist called you regressive.
Oh yeah, Persian atheist.
And I wrote
Persian
back.
atheist
I don't know
used
who
to
that was.
interact with me. I believe if it's the same person, this is somebody who had a lot of like, "Michael, what you should do is slow down Sam Harris's podcast so you can hear each individual word he's saying, and then you won't take him out of context."
So he called me
Be intellectually coherent.
Regressive, and I responded, "Silly." And then he said, "Ask Sir Dave Rubin about the regressives and TYT," and he tags Rubin Report. And I wrote, "No thanks. Sounds silly, but not fun." And that was back in a time
how
when
little you knew how fun it would be.
I was going to say, that was not good forecasting on your part.
No, look, it sounded silly, but not fun, but it turned out to be a lot of fun. And
extremely silly.
Yeah, let that be a lesson for you. If there's any moral that I want you to take from my relationship with Dave, which seems to have come to an end, not by my choice. It's not the first time I've been jilted. It'll take a little while. I'll probably, spy on him by going through another account or hopping on Instagram and seeing what he's up to, and maybe even join Facebook just to follow and see.
Dave, I want to hear about ideas.
Well, just
I want to know when you become pro-life.
The hardest part. Now that he's moved on to the Blaze and this and that, the hardest part to sort of get past is, and I will cop to this, the idea that I know at one point Dave's going to find another nemesis, and they're going to go back and forth on Twitter, and Dave's going to pretend like he's ignoring them, and it's hard for me to contemplate that being somebody but me. And but I do want to say this to Dave. Listen, if you change your mind, just simply flick that switch, man, and unblock me, and we can just start over and maybe try and recapture a little bit of what we had. If there was something specific I could change to allow us to start anew, I will do it. You have my Twitter feed, so.
Perhaps I could have poked or prodded in another way, but I felt trying to figure out why he thinks as he does is what my job is.
Goodbye, Dave. All right, folks. I'm probably going to need a little minute as we go to the fun half to just collect myself, but just a reminder that your support...
Did you just hear that?
Your support... What makes this show possible? You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. Don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority every morning, ladies and gentlemen, in the Majority Report audio feed on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you get your podcasts. You can hear the AM Quickie. We found a logo. We're about to set it off on its own soon. So check it out now while it's easy. Today's Monday. Michael, tomorrow's Tuesday.
Perhaps I could have poked and prodded. I could have asked Kianga Taylor more questions. However, I thought it was best that she put her ideas forward. I'm sorry. It's like...
I feel I have to get the gushing out first.
I did feel that way when I admire Kianga Yamada Taylor's writing quite a bit. Tomorrow, Emma Vigeland returns to TMBS. We're talking about, probably a lot of Kamala Harris's dad impressions tomorrow, among a serious assessment of why the hell Joe Biden isn't dropping out, an analysis of the Israeli elections, what's happening in Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Iran, UK elections, tons of stuff to get to. Patreon.com/TMBS, Michael Brooks Show on YouTube. Check out the great illicit history we just did of Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe. Get your tickets to our November 23rd live show in Philadelphia with Artesia Balthrop, Krystal Ball, and Emma Vigeland. It's the week before Thanksgiving. Don't worry. And this show, I made sure that this show is available to all ages because there have been a lot of disgruntled college students who are not 21, haven't been able to make it to other shows. World Cafe in Philadelphia, patreon.com/TMBS.
Jamie. I'm sorry. I'm still getting wistful.
I just should have poked and prodded to see, but I felt that not asking him about his ideas was the better way to go. It's like somebody dosed like a fly with acid or something.
Jamie.
This week on the Antifada, we have on sex and weed journalist Sophie St. Thomas to talk about sex under capitalism and the celebrated Alexandra Kollontai essay, Make Way for Winged Eros. Also, coming out on Wednesday, we have an episode with Aaron Bastani from Novara Media, who they do really good work across the pond in the UK, talking about his new book, Fully Automated Luxury Communism, and a little bit of Brexit. He's a super smart guy, and it was a good conversation, so check it out. Also, get your tickets to the Goth Socialist Variety Hour with the Antifada and Pod Damn America at Littlefield in Brooklyn, October 12th.
Matt.
Yeah, check out the most recent episode of Literary Hangover on James Fenimore Cooper's The Pioneers, including a sheriff who immediately starts recommissioning old military hardware and racially categorizing everybody.
All right, folks. See you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous. You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's a good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is the fun half of the Majority Report, as you know. We can talk about a whole range of things if you bring it up on the context of a phone call, or if we do get to IMs today. I think we will. We can talk about just about anything. One of the things I'm personally reading at the moment, not at this exact moment, but a piece by Ian Millhiser, who has now moved over to Vox, talking about a legal paper that was written about 10 years ago by two professors, both of whom have pretty impeccable right-wing credentials, libertarian credentials, And one is a former law clerk. I should say one is a former law clerk to Justice Thomas. One is a frequent contributor to right-wing legal journals. And they believe that there is a judicial process, a non-impeachment process that can be applied to federal judges. If they have not maintained good behavior. I don't know. Well, I'll read that a little more carefully and go into it later. But it's going to be an interesting. What we're going to see, particularly in the event the Democrats win, is we're going to see a lot of people doing research on how to work around the issue of the U.S. Senate, frankly. And in some instances, it may be, like Bernie Sanders brought up the other day, reconciliation on some major pieces of legislation. That's somewhat controversial. People don't know if you could fit all of this legislation into a reconciliation bill. Remember, it has to have a direct bearing on the budget. That determination is made by the parliamentarian. However, the Senate pro temp of the Senate president can overrule the parliamentarian with a 51-person vote. That person would be the vice president. Hard to know, though, that you could get, let's say, Chris Coons to vote not for a filibuster reform, but for this. I mean, so who knows? And let's talk about Chris Coons. I've said Chris Coons' name, I don't know, maybe a dozen times on this show over the years. And it seems that it's always in the context of him throwing water on any potential sparks of actual change in this country. He literally, I mean, if there's a single individual in the country who spends any time thinking about politics, is not aware of what the Republican Party has done in regards to the judicial. They refused to have hearings for Merrick Garland. Unprecedented. They were completely obstructionist during the Obama years. They widely used blue slips as a way of preventing judges from sitting on federal courts. Then they took all those vacancies, including Merrick Garland. They got rid of filibusters for all judges. They got rid of honoring blue slips from states that had 2 Democratic senators even. They've ran through the highest number of judges in the history, I think, of any first-term president with lifetime appointments. Chris Coons' response to what will you guys do if the Senate takes over this, if the Democrats take over the Senate? I think the first thing we should do is reinstate the filibuster to give Republicans the opportunity to completely obstruct again. That was the horn he was tooting a while back. But now he's starting to see, like, hey, wait a second. Democrats could take over the Senate. I've got to begin to position myself right in the center. I mean, this is one of the things that we heard about in the context years ago about reforming the filibuster. You could change the number that is necessary, but whatever number you sit, there's going to be some Democratic senators who are going to say, like, I'm going to position myself to be that number. You need 55 people? I'm going to be vote 55. I'm going to be vote 54. And Chris Coons is, maybe in his mind, I'm going to be vote 51. You can worry about Joe Manchin, but Joe Lieberman, hold my beer. And along those lines, here he is on Fox and Friends today.
If it is tied directly to Iran, what's appropriate action?
Well, first, I want to see the intelligence, but it seems credible that the Houthis don't have the sort of advanced drones that carried out this crippling strike on Saudi oil facilities. My hope is that the president will consult with his generals, his diplomats, his advisors, will look hard at the intelligence. Iran is one of the most dangerous state sponsors of terrorism. This may well be the thing that calls for military action against Iran if that's what the intelligence supports.
What about people who say, we got our own oil. We don't need that oil as much as we used to. Not our problem. What would you say to that?
I'd say one of the things that has kept America safe and secure for 7 decades is a global network of alliances. Obviously, our alliance with the Saudis has been badly strained by the murder of Khashoggi and by some of the other things that MBS, the Crown Prince, has done. But this is a moment where Iran is really pushing our resolve and is really testing to see whether we're actually going to stand up. And if there's attacks by Iran on our close allies like Jordan, Israel, or the Saudis, we need to take seriously taking action against
And I
Iran.
think it would be great to know that Republicans and Democrats would be behind that action if it should take place, and the evidence would be as overwhelming as it seems.
Yeah, there you have it. Democrats and Republicans. That's what he's doing. He's providing cover for a new war. A couple of things that stuck out to me. You know those other things that the Saudis are doing that's straining our relationship with them? They're using our weapons, our facilities, our support to kill thousands of people. Thousands of people in Yemen.
Oh, hundreds of thousands of people.
And the dynamic is almost exactly like the dynamic they claim the Houthis have with Iran. We are enabling the killings, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in Yemen. And when the rebels, essentially, or the civil war, fire back on the people that are attacking them. I mean, let's be honest here. This is not terrorism, right? Saudi Arabia is engaged in an air war with that country.
Well,
they have struck back.
I mean, and just to fill it out a little bit, 100% right. Also, Sudanese military forces, which have been subcontracted by the Saudis, are on the ground there committing other atrocities. So they actually have troops on the ground through the Sudan. They've killed hundreds of thousands of airstrikes, but there's also been cholera outbreaks and food shortages. And it is an international, there is zero debate for anybody who takes international law seriously, which Chris Coons probably does not, though he would cite it. That yes, if you are fighting an occupying force, that definitionally, not only is it not terrorism, it's legal. It is a correct action. It is a justified action. But and we should not accept this talking point that there's no way the Houthis could have done this. They might have gotten the one of the things that's so terrifying about drones now is that a lot of drones aren't even that technologically sophisticated.
Are we going to hold countries that sell weapons?
Well, there you go.
To fighting parties responsible for the use of those weapons? Because I get some bad news for us if that's the case.
Yeah, if the bad news would be that by that logic, the Houthis should be able to drop drone strikes on our facilities.
Of course,
here
of course.
Is the exact reality.
And not just the Houthis.
Everybody. There's probably not a country on earth.
That's setting a. I don't know that we want to go down that road where that becomes the justification for war. But there's another option that Chris Coons doesn't talk about if he's very concerned about supporting our allies, and that is, let's not be allies with Saudi Arabia anymore.
Well, you have to be so demented to still be married to this Israel-Saudi axis in the Middle East with all of the atrocities that those countries commit and all of the problems that basic structure causes. And, it went back to the deal with Iran that the Saudis and the Israelis were so upset, not because of, the non-crazy people understood it was a good deal and that it wasn't a threat to them, but just the idea that the United States might start to have a rational, non-biased view of the Middle East as a fundamental threat to their own hegemonic ambitions.
Let's watch Fox and Friends further go on to cheerlead this. So awful. To cheerlead this war with Iran. Now, back in the day, when the U.S. invaded and occupied illegally Iraq, some of us hippies, as you can see, would say, there's no reason to do this. He's no threat to us. This is just about oil. Not just Iraqi oil, but also being able to have a beachhead in a region that in some way it's basically less about us getting the oil, because they would say, well, how come oil is more expensive now? Anybody who has been to a keg party understands the value of having your friends control the keg, control the tap. Because then you can just cut lines and say, yeah, give me a cup of beer, please. And you don't have to wait in line. That's basically, I think, what the U.S. Foreign policy has been. We want to be the guys controlling the tap. We may not give it to America first, but we may want to control the tap. Here's Fox and Friends. They forgot that this was the premise of wars that we don't want to get involved in. Now it's just being sold that way.
Iran attacks Saudi Arabia as it has over 100 times. We are prepared to take action.
Well, the big question is, what is that going to be? And they have provoked us before. I mean, think about the tankers they have seized. They shot one of our drones out of the sky.
Oh,
and now it looks like this, even though the Houthi rebels are saying, oh, we did it 100%. Yeah, right.
We have video of all that.
You imagine being on a national news show and just going like, Houthi rebel. Like, he doesn't know. There's no doubt in my mind that maybe the first time the words Houthi rebels came out of his mouth.
You don't think Steve Doocy, fluent in the politics of Yemen?
Right. Oh, yeah, right. You did.
Sure.
Right. Sure.
You know, Brian, I was reading about the Houthi rebels before it was fashionable. And I think we all know they don't have that kind of...
Got to the office at 2 a.m. to look at the operational...
saying, oh, we did it 100%. Yeah, right.
We have video of all that. You just know it. By the way, two things. Number one, the drone attacks, extremely disturbing from a security standpoint. What stops it from happening here? Number two, we have to keep...
Well, what stops it from happening here? Do you hear what he's saying? We've got to stop the drones over there before they come over here. This is
pre-Iraq invasion.
This is D-team level pro-war propaganda. We got to stop the Iranian drones over there before they get here.
Said Houthi drones.
Houthi drones.
From a security standpoint, what stops it from happening here? Number two is we have to keep the Strait of Hormuz open, and we got to protect the world's oil supply. That just comes with being the United States of America. Even though we make a lot of it ourselves, we have to, in this case, make sure the Middle East has a sense of normalcy, and that's got to happen.
And the Europeans should step up as well as we go after the cause. So we will be covering that tomorrow.
Right, but Kellyanne Conway makes a great point. You know, why are we dependent on somebody else for our energy?
Exactly.
Right, but we do have a responsibility to the free world. We have the number one defense, and I think we should not duck from that responsibility.
Yeah, we have.
Kilmeade is personally anxious.
Oh yeah. The whole thing is just amazing. Like, oh yeah, no, we can pay for our own oil, but we have a responsibility because we've spent all this money on creating the most massive defense force in the world, like all the others combined 2 times over.
I do dig the frame that we need to ensure some sense of normalcy in the region by starting like a absolutely catastrophic war that would kill an untold amount of people and destabilize the place like almost apocalyptically.
To be fair, based upon what we did in the last 20 years, pretty close to being
normal U.S. action.
Yep. Look,
normal U.S. spill out.
The region is being destabilized because of the lack of major invading force that has come in.
So look, I understand Yemen and Syria are both absolute bloodbaths. There's multiple proxy wars. The Israelis are starting to more overtly bomb Syria, but it's too chill. We need to have an invasion of Iran.
It really is mask off time for these people, which I kind of appreciate. At least they're not talking about human rights anymore, you know?
It's total, exactly. It's totally, but it's D-team stuff. Like, oh God, I can't wait to go to those rallies where people are like, they shot down our drone, man. We got to fight. We're going to put a boot in your ass. I can't wait to all the songs that come out about that time
the
Houthis shot our drone down and we got to stop the drones.
We'll fly a drone over your house. It's the American way.
Yeah.
This gets a lot less metaphorical.
See Trump
None
just
of
tweet
you
out,
count as civilians. It's the American way.
Trump just tweets out "plenty of oil!" exclamation point yesterday.
Yeah, plenty of oil. There's also something very strange that's going on that I want to call your attention to. That I think is going to have some pretty big implications going forward in terms of hearings. I mean, right now, what the Democrats are doing, I don't think politically it makes any sense. And frankly, it doesn't make a ton of sense to me in terms of just pure from a policy standpoint. But they are investigating the bringing of impeachment, articles of impeachment. It's not quite an impeachment inquiry because they haven't sort of put themselves into impeachment mode. But according to Adam Schiff, they are in a mode that their subpoenas should be favored by courts. I don't know if that's the case, but there's something very weird in this story. Apparently, there was a whistleblower who came forward to the director of national intelligence. We don't know the nature of the whistleblowing. Maybe they do on the Intelligence Committee. Federal law mandates that this must be reported to Congress. And the information, there's a specific procedure to protect whistleblowers. Because if you don't let the air out of that tire, then you get a lot of leaks. The Inspector General, apparently, of the Director of National Intelligence interviewed this whistleblower, found them credible, at least in a first blush perspective. But apparently the DNI has been told by a higher power not to fulfill their federal statutory obligations. Here is Adam Schiff on with Margaret Brennan on CBS Face the Nation this weekend.
You issued a subpoena on Friday for the acting director of intelligence, alleging he's withholding a whistleblower disclosure, possibly to protect President Trump. That's a pretty significant allegation here. We're putting up a quote on the screen from you. Have you gotten a response to this letter?
We've gotten a response, and the director has said essentially that he is answering to a higher authority and refusing to turn over the whistleblower complaint. This is deeply troubling. No
Just
director,
ignoring the subpoena.
Well, at this point, yes. Ignoring the subpoena, ignoring our request. No DNI, no Director of National Intelligence, has ever refused to turn over a whistleblower complaint. And here, Margaret, the significance is the Inspector General found this complaint to be urgent, found it to be credible. That is, they did some preliminary investigation, found the whistleblower to be credible. That suggests corroboration. And that it involved serious or flagrant wrongdoing. And according to the Director of National Intelligence, the reason he's not acting to provide it, even though the statute mandates that he do so, is because he is being instructed not to. That this involved a higher authority, someone above the DNI. Well, there are only a few people above the DNI. So we're concerned this involves wrongdoing that's under investigation by our committee, and we're going to do everything necessary to make sure that whistleblowers not allowed to provide the complaint to us, but can come directly to Congress, which the director is also prohibiting at this point.
I order you not to hand over the whistleblower. I mean, it's only because we're of the left that we don't contemplate that it could be God who did this. And everybody's like, it's probably Donald Trump. It could be God. Could be God.
You leave him alone.
Don't you let that pencil neck geek, Schiff, see the whistleblower.
Adam Schiff. Adam Shit. Trying to undermine God.
So it could be Trump or maybe Barr.
I don't know if Barr would be considered to be an authority over the DNI. I just don't think he's in that flow chart. I don't frankly know who would be in that flow chart. Maybe the chief of staff. I don't know.
Director of the CIA.
But maybe.
Haspel.
I don't know. I do not know what constitutes a higher authority. Maybe we should have somebody on that. But I for one, would be very interested in hearing that whistleblower.
Nobody knows who the authority is.
No one knows.
Guess we can't do anything about it.
It's right, funny. Manis
Ivanka. Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
Just like we don't know.
Good job, Jared.
It's so funny. General Mattis said it's better to have cigarettes and a beer, and then this woman who looks like a librarian comes along, and she says, "Pull their toenails off." It's tough stuff.
Tough stuff.
She's in a hospital. Tough stuff.
But the stuff that he's outlining there, like it could be they saw an abuse on some type of like spying program, right? I mean, certainly whistleblowers have been ignored in the past, although a guy like Thomas Drake actually went to Congress and they found his claims credible. It's hard to know what it is that someone outside of the DNI would be quashing at this point.
I just have to say the fact that Trump called him, Adam's shit really was one of his better pieces of work. And the fact that he also managed to write in the tweet, D California.
Good work.
That was good work.
Got him.
That was correctly showing he could correctly identify.
That was a preemptive strike.
Maybe it was the same higher authority that told all those Bahama gang members they couldn't get on the boat.
Higher authority.
It's a higher authority.
I got about a paragraph through that Hitler book. That's what I got from it.
Caller from a 512 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Susan, Noah's mom in Austin.
Susan, Noah the intern's mom. How are you, Susan?
I'm well. I think he's trying to get in touch with you guys. He's at NYU now, so it's kind of exciting.
He should.
But I just had 3 quick things I wanted to throw out to the libertarians about the $15 minimum wage. This argument always makes me nuts, but 3 things. So my mom's family on her side lives in Norway. They're from Norway. And then we travel back and forth to Europe quite a bit. So I remember in the springtime, Mom and I went to Wales, and we were just going to look at some castles. And there was a lovely lady. We pulled up our car and parked, and she had her uniform on, and she was really friendly and helpful. And I looked at Mom and said, what a nice life for her to be able to live in this small town, take care of it, take care of the treasure that's here in their town to share with the world. And she makes a living wage. She can go home and have dinner at night with her family and probably, put her kids through school or whatever. But it's like, and that's the same in Norway. If you want to work at the grocery store, you can. If you want to flip burgers for the rest of your life, why shouldn't you be able to do that? Why does everybody have to be aspiring to be a billionaire? That's just ridiculous. So that, number one, makes me crazy. It's like people should be able to pick the job that they want to do and not be punished and expected to live at some expected lifestyle. Number 2, as a public school teacher, I'm going to tell you right now that market forces failed me because there's no way in the world that any teacher's getting paid what they're worth. And I imagine police officers and nurses and firemen feel the same way. And lastly, when he was talking about Malibu last week, one of my oldest childhood friends is a ski instructor in Aspen. She's been there for years. The only way she can live there, well, now her situation's better because she's inherited some money from parents, but Aspen, the average cost of living for a home there, it's like $7 million.
Right.
And that is a city. I imagine Malibu is the same way. I've never been there. But it relies a lot on the service industry. And if the city doesn't subsidize housing for people who work at the grocery stores or at the ski resort or whatever, then there's nobody to work in those jobs. And if they have to live outside of Aspen, it's difficult to get there. They couldn't afford to come in and out of town to serve all those rich people. So, I mean, it's like, but it's just ridiculous. The whole thing that you don't want somebody to be able to live where they're born or live where they want to live and be able to, they don't have to have a mansion in Malibu or Aspen, but they ought to be able to live there and work and not be punished. That's not a bad decision. My friend wanted to be a ski instructor. That's not a bad decision. That was her life's happiness. Anyway, that kind of stuff just makes me crazy. And I wanted to, when I was listening to that conversation between you and the libertarian, my head was about to explode. So that's it.
Well, Susan, I appreciate the call. And it's a good point. There's no... Why can't people live, just work a job that it's something they enjoy doing. It pays enough so that you can have a reasonably comfortable life without having to
Whoa,
sort of
wait,
get
I'm
into
sorry,
a
I
rat
have a
race.
question. And the phone line's a little bad. I'm sorry. Why doesn't your friend just move to the Berkshires? There's smaller mountains, I guess. But if she wasn't in a strong enough position to buy a house in Aspen, I just don't feel as if I should need to pay for that. I mean, you're laughing, but it's a point.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
We should just.
Why is Ohio actually has ski
I'll tell you what we
mountains?
should be
People
doing.
don't know.
Nationalize Aspen.
Hell yeah.
Call from a 603
Well, you
area
know, I
code.
agree with that.
Call from a 603 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, it's John from Houston. I'm kidding. But I had a comment about your Dr. Vox interview last week.
My doctor what?
Vox?
Oh, okay. Yeah, Dave Roberts.
Vox?
Okay, yeah. It's not Dr. Vox.
Yeah.
Dave Roberts, right. Okay.
Is it not?
No, he's Dave Roberts at Vox.
Yeah. Right. Anyways.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have to go. Ha ha.
What?
Ugh.
Was that a prank phone call? Calling from a 310
There's
area
real
code. Who's
tears
this?
to things. Real tears. So as an example where libertarians might have a point is Chris James maybe should get paid for that. You shouldn't.
Hi.
Hi.
Who's this?
This is Lauren from Ventura.
Hi, Lauren. What's on your mind?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Well, okay, good. I was calling as a follow-up to my previous call, I don't know, a couple months ago about, what I even call about, like getting medical care. Like I'm a chronic pain patient because of serious health concerns, and your segment today about the opioid crisis, it's a really difficult topic. I mean, for me, it's really frustrating for me and a number of other chronic pain patients. It's like we've all been through the ringer of every type. I have tried every type of pain management option, and like the only thing that helps me a little bit is opioids. And for them to be so stigmatized, it hampers our. Sorry, I'm walking, so I'm a little out of breath. It hampers our ability to get the care we need.
Right.
And so it's like it's frustrating because it's like I do know that there is a problem of overprescription in some instances, but it's like there's two sides to every coin because it's such like a national thing that it's like it's this epidemic proportion problem. Then it's like people like me. There are lots of people in the chronic pain community that it's like we are not allowed to get care. Like, for example, it's been 4 years that I've been in pain since having a brain hemorrhage in 2015. And it took me 3.5 years for any doctor to be willing to prescribe me anything that actually helped with pain, which was opioids. I tried every single medication that's possible. I tried spinal cord stimulators. I tried like chiropractic. I tried like all these like woo-woo stupid things that don't help at all, that doctors were telling me I had to use. And yet, I'm still in this position of where it's like, I understand that it's like, it's a personal problem that I feel attacked by it, but it's frustrating because every time I see my pain management doctor, he's like, I had been referred to him from my previous pain management doctor who tried every trick he had and nothing helps me. And like, it's like, he always laments how like every time I go to the pharmacy, the pharmacists like interrogate me because I'm young and they think I'm just like drug seeking. And it's like, okay, sorry, people who are like in their 20s and 30s have pain too. Like, you don't know what happened to us, So I don't know. That's just sort of like my soapbox.
Listen, I feel badly for you. I totally understand the dynamic you're talking about, and in some respects, it is part of what should be considered in the in holding these companies to account, because not only did they create an epidemic of epic proportions, killing tens of thousands of people annually. And they also made it difficult for people who genuinely need to, who are appropriate for this type of medication
exactly.
to get it. And this is part of, I mean, I don't know what the solution is, right? Like, I don't know, like maybe.
Yeah, no, I don't either. That's the first
right.
thing.
Well, that's what it sounds like. It's like you realize like this is a situation that is like one of those things that are intractable. And like this ends up being, you know, part of the suffering is not just in those people who shouldn't have been on that medication or overprescribed it, but a part of the suffering is people who do need that medication and now have more trouble getting access to it because society has to overcompensate for the problems that were created by this company going around saying this stuff is not addictive. And my heart goes out to you. And I mean, I hope that there ends up being something that they find that will, you know, it isn't as scrutinized as much as opioids are at this point, that will give you some, you know, some measure of relief. My heart goes out to you. I'm sorry about this.
Yeah, no, it's well, you know, the thing that I'm on the waiting list for right now that's like pretty insane. I can't believe, like, you know, 5 years ago I would have never thought I'm doing this, but I'm going to get ketamine infusions, which is this like insane, where I'll have to go for like weeks on end to be infused with ketamine. But I would just like to say one other little factoid about my specific plight right now that I just learned. There was an article in some like normal newspaper. Gosh, what was it? An article in in The Guardian just a few days ago that talked about how women weren't included in clinical trials for drugs until the 1990s. So like during my lifetime. And despite the fact that we make up 70% of chronic pain patients, 80% of pain medication has only been tested on men. So people like me are just like really sort of up the creek without a paddle. I don't expect any any response from you on this that can have any meaning. But I just wanted to draw people's attention to this issue because it's obviously something near and dear to my heart since it is, my life.
Oh, but, yeah. There's also a lot of bias in how pain is treated against women and people of color. I saw some statistics once where like women are more likely to be treated for anxiety and men are more likely to be believed about their pain. And that sounds about right.
Yeah, no, that's been my experience too. Even like decades ago when I had anxiety, I was having chest pains and I went in for my chest pains and they were just like, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, and it's like, it was clearly that I had anxiety, but they wouldn't even tell me that. I was just left there thinking that I was like still going to die. And I realized that it's like, I'm so lucky that I'm white, but even so, I realized that there are instances where like, because I'm a woman, I'm talked down to, especially by my male doctors. Like I'm lucky now I have some doctors that are like around my age, which is also horrifying that now I'm that old. The doctors are my age, but it's like, they are more sympathetic, but these old white guy doctors, man, they just, they are not very sympathetic to those who are not also old white guys.
Appreciate the call. Hang in there. Check back with us. I'm sorry you're going through this.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Calling from a 702 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. It's Bro Flamingo from Las Vegas.
Bro Flamingo from Las Vegas. What's on your mind?
Hey, Sam. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Excellent. I'm all right. I just want to give you my take on what happened during the debates. I kind of feel like Joe Biden had his worst night.
Yeah.
Out of the whole time, and I think like Sam, because I'm kind of glad I called later because we kind of first watch it and you kind of digest everything on the next day. You know what I'm saying? You kind of want to wait until you can get through everything, but I kind of felt like, too, Julian Castro actually probably had his best night. Same for Beto, had his best night. I think one thing that was kind of lost in the kind of conversation was how pretty much Julian Castro pretty much kneecapped Buttigieg the rest of the night. I mean, when Buttigieg tried to do this is why middle America, nobody really likes watching it because shut up, stupid. Okay, it's a debate.
Right.
Let's get to it. So
I had no idea that Castro was this like ornery. I mean, I like it. There's nothing in his previous appearances I've seen that would indicate it.
Absolutely. Also, Mike, to your point, actually, I kind of like Julian Castro now because to me, he kind of fulfilled de Blasio's role as kind of like the attack dog. I mean, he's out there getting to it, so I really like that.
I can see that.
I'm all here for it. Also, I would say Klobuchar DOA. Let's get her off the stage. It's bad. It's embarrassing. I think also another thing too is that I really think that kind of I don't want to see civility politics died last night, but after kind of Julian Castro kneecapping Buttigieg on like the nonsense of like guys we got to be polite, whatever. I think the next debate will be much better. The record player thing, Sam, it's easy to talk about that, but there's another one I want to talk about. Trump can do this all the time, but it was just stunning to watch Biden do this. Not only was he lying about the Iraq war answer, it was incoherent at the same time. It was just crazy.
Yeah, people who are my age remember that Joe Biden was he was not along for the ride. Joe Biden was out there basically corralling the buses and getting people on board. And, he was Senate Armed Services. And I think he wanted to have, I think he was one of those guys who wanted to have an independent Kurdish state. And so I think he thought this was a route to that on some level. And I'm not sure what was behind that.
Oh, he was even worse. He wanted to, by the way, let me be clear. I do support a Kurdish state, but his whole big thing was he wanted to split Iraq up into three parts.
Three parts.
The arrogance.
Right.
The presupposition of that.
And there was some, notion that this was, I don't know what the theory it was behind that per se, but he was pretty gung-ho for this war. And I think it certainly was one of those situations where it's like, and it's the same thing you see it from Chris Coons in this instance too. It's like, here's what we're going to do. Right. I'm going to set a condition I'm going to make my support for this war conditioned upon a conclusion by people who I should not trust. But it sounds reasonable. I'm not going to say I'm for war. I'm going to set it on a condition that sounds reasonable, except for everybody knows you should not trust those people and that they have an agenda. And that's the way they do this. That's the way they sound reasonable. That's the way that we get led into war. And then everybody says, you got to talk to the generals and you got to talk to, well, what if the generals say, this is not so? But then we'll find different generals. You got to talk to the intelligence people. Well, what if the intelligence people say, actually, it's not so clear? We'll get different intelligence people. We know how this works. And so for someone like Chris Coons to go on and say something like that, Joe Biden was one of those guys, but really in many ways more so because he was, I think, a leader of the Senate Armed Services and was very hawkish, it seemed to me. But
right. Also, Sam, I'll say two quick things. I'll jump because I also want Jamie's take on something real quick. But the second thing was too, Sam, just it was weird because it was almost like Joe Biden was in reverse in a sense because like on the record player answer, they teed that question up for him and he could have knocked it out the park and they could have moved on.
Yeah.
Just completely bombed. And the thing about the Iraq war thing was why'd you even bring that up? That was just weird to me. Like, why even bring that? I mean, it's kind of baked into the cake already. You should have even mentioned it. And the last thing I'll say, because I kind of want Jamie's opinion, also your guys' opinions on this too, then I'll jump. It's just the Kavanaugh thing is coming back. Of course we knew it would come back, okay? Right. The rapists, the thieves, the thugs, the trash. But the thing is, though, there's a through line here. Because I just kind of put it all together. Joe Biden, Bill Clinton, Kavanaugh, Donald Trump, and a lot of the trash and the detritus, these guys are all the same person when it comes to women and misogyny and some of the, these guys just can't apologize, they can't own up to it. And I was reading in the New York Times comment section, it was a Charles Blow.
Bro Flamingo, if you got a question you want us all answer, you got to get to it, man. We got to move.
Oh, sorry. No. I just wanted your guys' opinion because I just feel like honestly, at the end of the day, look, this thing about women and these guys going nuts about, raping women all the time. All these guys have all the women problem and stuff. These guys are all pretty much all the same guys, Sam. That's the way I see it.
Yeah.
Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Bill Clinton, all these guys. I'll let Jamie's opinion and I'll jump. Thanks, guys. Thanks for my call.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate the call. Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly matters of degree, but you can see a certain through line between all of these sexist men who are also arguably misogynistic and in the policies that they support. I mean, I felt it in my bones that Kavanaugh was getting on there, and I couldn't totally explain why on a logical level, other than the fact that I know that this country and this society absolutely does not care about survivors of sexual assault. I haven't really talked about it on the show before, but I am a survivor of sexual assault, and I just knew. Like, I know I like to do the wide angle thing and say, I can tell what social forces are arraying against us, but that is definitely one of them.
I think the point of like all these guys being the same guy, I mean, I think you have a certain attitude towards the world, and part of that is obviously like your superiority to women, right? I mean, I think you have that attitude towards a large segment of the population, but particularly
in John Ronson's The Psychopath Test, he argues that is a trait that actually might help you rise up the ranks in certain like corporate America situations. And there's obviously other traits that are, less severe than psychopathy, but like just sort of misogyny and basically just not caring about other people that are major assets.
Like if you have that perspective on women, there's 50% of the people on day one that you don't have to give a shit about as you trample through and move forward, right? Like, and then you could just keep layering sets of people. Like, I don't even have to think about that. Like that dude over there, I got to contemplate. Like, wait, where is he going? Is he possible? But the rest, I could just go. Whoop.
Well, but even the broader implications for there's actually these really vivid lines that Christopher Hitchens did really ham up, though, of like talking about Bill Clinton and Dick Morris just like indulging themselves in the most grotesque ways while like signing welfare reform legislation and like terrorizing poor people with work requirements and lectures on their morality and this type of thing. So I think Bro Flamingo's onto something.
Yeah, it's also evident in how they treat people of color, right? Which is so condescending, and like they should be grateful for any attention given to them by Joe Biden. Like, give me a break.
Speaking of Biden, I don't want to play the corn pop thing. I don't care. Honestly, like he's got a story.
I remember I was in Worcester and there was somebody named Corn Pop.
I mean,
and I was at the swimming pool and I was an assistant lifeguard. I wasn't the only lifeguard because I had asthma, but I was there.
This was he did this in 2017, right? It was when he was there. Because I don't think he could deliver that story today. I don't mean to be a jerk. I'm not being cute. When I saw that, I was like, well, at least he's got some energy. Maybe he gets more energized when he's talking about the old days, but I don't think he could deliver that same story today.
And Corn Pop.
Just play a little
Corn
bit.
Pop
Play
said,
a little
don't
bit.
Give it to me.
Yeah, play a little bit of it. Because I honestly, like, look, this Corn Pop story, I think it's true. I think it's his way of showing, like, I'm a tough guy. I'm tough, but I'm fair. And, this is, and he was at the pool. And so he just recalling his days at the pool. Like, I'm regular Joe, Corn Pop. I had chains. But yeah, this is, did you hear the whole thing? But here's the thing. I don't think Joe Biden today could tell this story like this. Go.
I learned a lot. And I learned that it makes a difference. This was the diving board area. And I was one of the guards. And they weren't allowed to. There was a 3-meter board, and if you fell off sideways, you landed on the darn cement over there. And Corn Pop was a bad dude, and he ran a bunch of bad boys. And I did. And back in those days, to show how things have changed, one of the things you had to use, if you used pomade in your hair, you had to wear a bathing cap. And so he was up on the board, wouldn't listen to me. I said, "Hey, Esther, you. Off the board, or I'll come up and drag you off."
Okay, pause it. So basically, what he's showing is that, like, he was a tough guy. He was a tough guy. What was it?
Brendan said, like Little Richard up there.
Oh, yeah. This story also highlights the fact that he's 1,000,000 years old.
Yes, that's my point. Like the pomade comment, you're like, wait, what? And he calls him Esther.
They were greasers.
Now, I think he's referring to Esther Williamson or something like that, who was they used to do water ballet movies.
Yeah, I had to look that one
awesome.
up.
Oh, so he was really telling Corn Pop, like, yo.
Yeah, Corn Pop.
Hey,
like,
Esther.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
exactly.
awesome.
That's
you know what? I'm going to vote for Joe Biden.
Right,
That's cool.
Well, that, I think, is
I
what
actually
he was
like that. That's good
trying
shit
to communicate.
talking.
Like, I was a toughie. I
Hey,
wasn't afraid.
I don't care. Hey, Esther.
But then
that's
at the end
awesome.
of the story, he says, I shouldn't have called you Esther, but I still need to follow the rules. Now, I don't think the story
endorsement retract.
I just think I just think that the real main problem with this story, aside from the fact that like he's really hanging on to this is from 2 years ago. I honestly don't think that Joe Biden could tell a story that is 6 minutes long today and have it be relatively coherent. I mean, is there footage of him talking, not on a speech, on something that's written in front of him, but recounting something and be able to sort of follow it through with that narrative? I mean, I'm not being facetious here. I just haven't seen it. And in the context of the debate, I've seen this guy debate plenty of times before. You see him in these debates, and his answer about, in terms of reparations, was all over the place.
Do you ever find out why they ended the debate 15 minutes early?
I think people just got bored.
No.
Or maybe they just scheduled it like it was supposed to be that long, and so that they could, they'd get some ad time afterwards, because they probably have a higher ad density in that last half hour, and they probably want to keep it in prime time. That's my guess. So that's what Joe Biden had for us this week. Corn Pop.
And it turns out Corn Pop is real, by the way. I was just reading an article.
Oh, I believe it. I'm sure it's real. I don't think there's any reason to doubt that it's real. I think, to me, the most telling part is that, like, he's talking about how old, how his perspective has changed on things. And the only thing that he comes up with what's old about that story is the pomade needing a bathing cap.
I only wish Corn Pop were still alive today to comment.
Maybe he is.
He's not.
Oh. Corn Pop's family. So Bernie Sanders has come out, and we'll talk more about the details on this in a day or two. But Bernie Sanders has come out with a affordable housing plan that involves rent control across the country, also involves significant funding to upgrade existing public housing, money to support housing across the board. And what this is going to do is it's going to shore up neighborhoods that are in decline, neighborhoods that are subject to gentrification, and allow people to actually live in nice neighborhoods without having to come in, without having it, stay in their neighborhoods, be able to live in neighborhoods that are improving and enjoy the fact that they have invested their lives in these neighborhoods. Here's Bernie Sanders delivering that speech on housing.
It is not acceptable to me that wealthy and powerful real estate developers in Nevada and throughout this country, and I've seen this all over America, are gentrifying neighborhoods and forcing working class families out of their homes and apartments that they have lived in for decades, and forcing them out and replacing that housing, that affordable housing, with fancy condos and luxurious homes that only the very wealthy can afford. That is not acceptable. We're going to stand up to gentrification.
Now, there he is. He had a lozenge that he ejected. The issue that we have now in the wake of the housing crisis, the financial crisis, I should say, that was brought about by an inflated housing bubble, is that you have so many foreclosed homes around the country that ended up getting bought by huge hedge funds that were not in the business of being landlords. And they bought up all these houses at a huge discount, obviously fire sales, literally almost in some instances. And they're crappy landlords, or they're going in with specifics and specific places and getting the best of the properties and doing tear downs and then building up, like Bernie said, much more expensive housing. And it's a problem. It's causing people to move further and further out. It's immiserating people. It's keeping people from living in decent neighborhoods. It's, I would imagine, also adding to the segregation of schools in many respects. When was the last time we had a presidential candidate who talked about housing? Well, honestly.
Yeah, Sam Stein also gives a lot of good background in his book and on this very show and on my show about why the economy has developed in this way at this particular time to be so heavily reliant on real estate.
It's a problem, but here's Bernie, again, expanding the terrain in which the candidates have to address policy failures. But there's two sides to every coin. Bernie Sanders, of course, was hoarse during the last debate, and some people watched that. I'm talking about clip number 10. And some people, some pundits, some voters, they don't want somebody who is in any way aggressive or any way fighting. They want someone who is like visually appealing and, good looking, soft spoken, reasonable guy. And some people, particularly like, I guess when Bernie's voice was a little raspy, maybe they could look at Bernie and think like, oh, his voice is raspy. He's elevating his volume. He seems angry. Now, I don't think most people with that, but if you're sensitive, if you're one of those people who thinks that, like, I want my politician to be good looking and just sort of, and not confrontational.
Yo, Bernie's a snack.
Yeah. Well, some people disagree. Like, for instance, this excuse for a human being who was relentlessly mocking teachers who were his constituents, who, of course, flamed out after his attempt to punish people politically by causing traffic jams going onto the George Washington Bridge. I'm, of course, talking about the ace ABC pundit, Chris Christie.
Quite frankly, Sanders to me looked unglued.
Well, he was also having some trouble with his throat that night.
He was, but it's not just his throat, George. I mean, his eyes were bulging out of his head. Visually, I can tell you, because I was watching it on TV, he looked disturbing to me, that he really looked angry. And I don't think that Democratic primary voters want angry. I think they want effective.
They want somebody with fire in the belly. He's not
effective.
angry. He's a passionate politician who brings his emotions to the table. I thought he did an effective job.
Yeah.
Wow. What they want is a morbidly obese, corrupt asshole who terrorizes teachers in between stuffing his face and literally chased a teacher down the boardwalk with a melting ice cream cone in his hand. That's the kind of integrity and stability that they want. And it's cool because then you still get rewarded with a TV gig, even though you're a national embarrassment and left with record high approval ratings. And we're an early endorser of Donald Trump, which is also speaking of stability and emotional health.
You know what I would like to see, like someone like a host, like a George Stephanopoulos at that time, or maybe one of the other panelists, like, what makes you, like, what gives you this insight into what Democratic voters want?
This insight into
like,
non-shouting
all
human
the polling, we know there's 3 top candidates in the Democratic primary right now. Is there one who has not expressed anger of one sort or another? I mean, honestly, You know, Biden's been a little bit more sort of focused on Trump. But and Warren and Bernie's, like, I mean, to what extent, who in the Democratic Party represents the non-angry, like is not trying to express some measure of anger? Is it Klobuchar? Oh, it's Pete Buttigieg. That's who it is. It's Pete Buttigieg, who is polling at around what, like 3%? Is it 3%? I mean, I'd just be curious. If a pundit is going to say this stuff, you got to let people like respond to it, not just on the question of like Chris Christie's perspective that Bernie Sanders is out of control. I mean, the basic premise of what he's trying to argue is to like, maybe that's what people want.
Never mind, does he know who won the last time around?
Exactly. And who didn't win. Here is Pete Buttigieg. And he is coming out. He's basically like trying to, I don't know. I'm trying to think like maybe he's thinking like VP of one of these people. Like, I just don't know what he thinks he's doing here, where he's positioning himself for. Maybe it's to run for governor. Maybe he's decided, like, I don't know. But Pete Buttigieg, he thinks that what we can do is return to a time that really basically never was.
As the youngest candidate in the field, I am obviously a believer in the power of generational change. I also believe that a candidate at any age, depending who they are, can be a great president. What we got to talk about right now is vision. My concern about the vision from the Sanders-Warren approach is that it can polarize Americans when we have other ways to deliver bold solutions without dividing the American people further. My difference with the vice president is that I also don't think promising.
Pause it for 1 second. I want you to talk about this idea of polarization. Like, it's almost as if people don't understand what the word means. Like, we're polarized. This country is as polarized as it could be. The idea that in some fashion, the Democrats have the ability to like, I guess the only thing he's saying is that, like, look, here's the center, right? And here are the conservatives. And they're way out here. And Democrats have been here. And if we get Warren or Sanders, we're going to be here. And that's going to increase the polarization. I get news for you. There's nothing Pete Buttigieg is going to do that is going to in any way diminish because we have seen for the past 25 years that if the Democrats move this way, the Republicans move that way. They go further. The spectrum in America is pretty standard. The outer margins, maybe who fills them, isn't, you know, but the parameters of what we have in this country are pretty well set. Even our left is not that left.
And the right side doesn't even fit in the screen.
Well, that's right. And so the bottom line is he is basically just saying we need to return to the time that got us to where we are today so that we can do this again. But let's hear his critique of Joe Biden, who is also making that same pitch, though. But apparently he's doing it with maybe his teeth falling on his eyes bleeding.
The American people further. My difference with the vice president is that I also don't think promising that we're going back to normal is going to be a message that'll hit people well, certainly where I come from in the industrial Midwest. There are a lot of people who voted for this current president not because they think he's a good guy, but because normal wasn't working for them and they were ready to more or less vote to burn the house down. If all we have to offer is, hey, let's dial it back and go back to what we were doing, if it feels like we're looking to the past, I think that message is going to come up short when we get to Election Day.
So he's basically saying, I've got a third secret way.
Alfred E. Newman. I mean, which is just mwah. But I think that, you know, yeah, but literally it is a third secret way. He's doing the third way for 2019. And he's just saying Joe Biden's third way is 1980's third way.
Yeah,
my third way
alert.
is 2019 third way. I think it's also, secret. It's really interesting too, because Bernie actually is attempting on some level to say, and I think this argument, even if it can't reach a lot of people, it can reach some. And it needs to be made or else we're not going to survive, right? He's saying, like, look, we need to get back. There does need to be a polarization, right? Between the 99%, the 1%, between workers and capital or whatever. So he is attempting to at least make a grounded version of that argument, an argument that has some semblance of reality. If you read Pete's book, he's doing a lot of, and again, it's pure Clintonism. He's doing, what's the famous line? What's the discriminatory fast food chain? He has this famous line where he's like,
Chick-fil-A?
Yeah, I don't like their politics, but I'm quite partial to their chicken.
Of course.
That's his whole shtick, is not acknowledging the reality of the polarization and then thinking a bunch of like cheap cultural signifiers would do something, not actually building people together in an actual coalition to do something in the real world, which is why, of course, he hasn't said anything about the UAW walkouts or anything. He's trash.
We will get to these UAW walkouts tomorrow, but just to give you a little bit more information, as of, I guess it was 11:59 p.m. last night as opposed to 12 a.m. this morning, 50,000 UAW workers in facilities from Michigan to Texas are participating. It's a contract negotiation. Wages, healthcare benefits, temporary workers, job security, profit sharing. And you have 200 local union leaders voted unanimously to support the strike. Back in 2007, which is the last time we had a strike of this type, UAW called for work stoppage, cost General Motors more than $600 million. So we'll see how long it takes for General Motors to give in, but it's nice to see more labor action.
Hell yeah. And so far, Bernie is only feeding back into the movement, which is super important.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 760 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. This is Amy from San Diego.
Amy from San Diego. What's on your mind?
So I called into David Pakman's show last week, and I asked him about if Bernie would commute or pardon Edward Snowden. And at the beginning of the show, I know you talked about Edward, so I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I don't know. I mean, I have no ideas on that. I mean, I imagine my guess would be, I mean, if Snowden's just simply saying, like, I want to be assured a fair trial, which I think is not, it's not. I don't think it's something you can take for granted, frankly. But it's conceivable to me that the Sanders would, if anything, it maybe under those in that context, have him back. I mean, do something to create some type of scenario where the trial would be, where he would have, a more of an opportunity to sort of say, like, here's what I revealed. Here's the cost at which it was done, and here is the benefit in terms of, it being a genuine whistleblower action. I mean, it uncovered criminal wrongdoing, in my estimation, of what the NSA and what different spying services were doing, contrary to statute in this country. And that, to me, is what a whistleblower does. And no one's been able to establish, the destruction of any spy networks. We kept hearing that they supposedly put people's lives in danger, but we never heard any even secondhand evidence of that. And I imagine that's because there wasn't. But I don't have a sense of what Sanders would do about that, to be honest with you.
I would support him pardoning Snowden. I'll say that.
I'd be in favor of that.
As a matter
as well.
of our normative positions, I think we'd all support that, right?
Yeah, I certainly would support that without a doubt.
My guess would be, I have no clue, but my guess would be is that this is something that could maybe be put in play. I wouldn't bank on it, but, that's the type of thing where maybe it could be put in play with him. All the rest of them, no way.
Appreciate the call. Calling from a 510 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 510. 510. 510. Bye-bye. Calling from a 901 area code. 901.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes. Oh, my God, bro. I can't believe I got on. Yo, Sam, this is Riddell from originally from Memphis. I moved to Texas in 2017. I love you guys. Just found y'all in January this year. And, man, I fucking love y'all's show. Like, y'all are so intelligent. I fucking love watching y'all. But mainly I wanted to call about pretty much, like, it's really sad what we're seeing with Iran. It's like, I love foreign policy. Like, I studied political science in college. I'm 21, and I love history. It's my area of interest. And this shit we're doing with Iran is ridiculous. Like, I had a conversation with a friend on Instagram not long ago, like with the drone strike that happened, and I put no war with Iran. Immediately he responds. He's a right winger, and he voted for Trump, and he immediately responds, they shoot down a drone and we shouldn't do anything. I'm like, bro, do you not know the history of like what we've done? 1953, overthrowing supporting the coup and all this stuff. Like, they just completely ignore history. Like, it's ridiculous. I love the calls you have with libertarians and stuff. It's so incredible. Like, just basically pointing out the fantasies and stuff. And last thing I want to say, Matt, you're a Brewers fan, aren't you?
No, I'd probably say I'm a Twins fan, but I basically hop around.
Okay. I thought you were a Brewers fan, man. It's sad about my boy Yelich, man. I love baseball. I love cold as fuck, man. But that's all I wanted to say.
Well, Riddell, thank you so much. I appreciate the phone call. Yeah, and it's also, look, we had a deal with Iran that I appreciate the call. We had a deal with Iran that took nukes off the table so that you could sit down with them with the knowledge, frankly, like, look, that gives us a certain amount of leverage. Doesn't give us total leverage, but it gives a certain amount of leverage. The idea that, like, we've already agreed, no nukes. You're getting this money. And then the question is, like, how do we use that leverage to bring them further into the international community so that these regional fights they have, but part of that also deals with basically not giving Saudi Arabia every single thing it wants.
But they are in the international community. I mean, that's the thing about Iran. Like, and this has nothing to do with just, set aside, if you're talking about any of these countries, including the United States, there's plenty of human rights violations and so on. But they have deep relationships with Russia, with China. They have good relationships with the Europeans increasingly. They were building partnerships in Latin America. It just looks absurd, on every single level. Like, they have been pretty broadly integrated into the international system. And that right now you have like a situation where, Libya wasn't a deal, but Gaddafi dismantled his program and then we destroyed him, right. Celebrated people sodomizing and murdering him on the streets. Rubio just tweeted that out as a threat to Maduro. And then we scrapped this deal, which there's not a single person that questions whether or not they were following it.
No, there was no doubt whatsoever. And, best case scenario at this point is that we get another deal that is like the last deal, except for we just call it Trump's deal.
And a war with Iran would be so much worse than the war in Iraq.
Yes, without a doubt.
Calling from a 518 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hello?
Hey, this is Arthur calling from Vietnam.
Arthur from Vietnam. What's on your mind, Arthur?
Well, I'm just, being here in Vietnam, I had some observations I wanted to share.
Please.
Specifically about socialism.
Okay.
So I just think it's funny how much America fears socialism, especially when it comes to healthcare, and yet, like, I've come to realize in asking Vietnamese friends here that if you don't have money or health insurance here, you will die if you go to the hospital. Like, it's just you're free to die as you are in America. Yeah, that was mostly just a little tidbit that I had. The other thing, just a small rant about how much centrism pisses me off.
Sure.
Yeah. I've been thinking about it, and I don't understand what centrism really can mean, like in the context of racism or abortion. Like, how can you be centrist on an issue like that? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. And whether you, like, when a centrist is in power, they, for example, like Obama, you end up with Republicans kind of steering things their way, and then even worse is after Obama, you end up with somebody like Trump. So it's a very detrimental position to take, I think.
Well, at the very least, and it's sort of like what we were talking about with Buttigieg's argument. I mean, the bottom line is you're negotiating against yourself. There is this idea, and it's also, the question as to what constitutes centrism, I guess. I mean, if they want to call it centrism, but the fact of the matter is that if you measure it based upon issue sets as to what the American public expresses that they want, they're not really. Centrists tend to be to the right of the American public. And so, I don't know how else you could determine it, and just in terms of sheer numbers, but it really is what we should use instead of centrism is really more just like establishment and sort of status quo.
Corporate apologists.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're right economically and center left on social issues when they don't compromise them away.
Appreciate the call.
Right.
Thanks.
Yep.
All right, folks, that's it for today. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive